All right, today we are diving into one of the most beloved and frankly baffling Christmas traditions out there, the plum pudding. It's a dessert that's steeped in history, absolutely loaded with fruits, and as we're about to find out, it's at the heart of a really peculiar puzzle. And there it is. That's the big question, isn't it? It's the one thing everybody wonders. You get this dense, dark, delicious dessert. You slice into it, and you see raisins, you see currants, maybe some apricots, but not a single plum in sight. So what's the deal? Well, stick around because we are about to solve this delicious mystery.
So, before we jump in our time machine, let's make sure we're all on the same page. When we talk about a plum pudding today, we mean a steamed, sort of cake-like dessert. It's incredibly rich, dark, and just packed with dried fruits and warm spices. It's a huge deal at Christmas dinner, especially for families with roots in the British Isles. And yeah, it's often served with a boozy sauce or even, famously, set on fire. But it was not always this way. Not even close.
See, to understand the name, you have to understand the journey this thing has been on. This dessert has a long, winding history that starts somewhere you would never, ever expect. We're not talking about a baker's kitchen, we're talking about a bubbling pot over a medieval cooking fire. And just look at how dramatic this transformation was. The pudding's earliest ancestor was this savory, meaty porridge called pottage. Think of it like a thick stew with meats and veggies boiled for hours. It was a main course. It wasn't until the Victorian era, when sugar and spices became more affordable, that it morphed into the sweet, fruit-filled dessert we know. Even the cooking method changed, from being boiled in a cloth to being steamed neatly in a ceramic basin. And here it is, boom, the answer to our puzzle. It's all about language. The name is basically a linguistic fossil. Back in the day, in Old English, the word plum wasn't a specific fruit. It was a catch-all term for any dried fruit. So raisins, prunes, currants, they were all just plums. A plum pudding was simply a pudding that was full of dried fruit. The name just stuck long after the way we use the word plum changed. So the big takeaway? It was never supposed to have plums in it. Of course, you can't talk about plum pudding without talking about the guy who made it a global superstar, Charles Dickens. His description in A Christmas Carol totally cemented this thing in our collective imagination as the Christmas dessert. And that famous speckled cannonball shape he talks about, that's a direct reference to the old-school method of packing the pudding mix into a cloth, tying it up tight, and boiling it for hours. Okay, so we've cracked the case of the missing plums, but what actually goes into this dessert that makes it so unique and so beloved? Let's take a look under the hood and deconstruct a classic plum pudding. I love this slide because it shows you everything at a glance. On the left, a recipe from 1827. Super simple. Suet, raisins, currants, breadcrumbs. Now look at the right, a modern recipe. The heart of it is the same, but you can see the evolution. We use way more types of fruit now, prunes, apricots, you name it. And alcohol, like a good brandy or rum, has gone from an afterthought to a key player, added right into the mix for that deep flavor and to help preserve it. Now, let's get into the real controversy. The thing purists will argue about for hours, the fat. Traditionally, you gotta use suet. That's the hard fat from around a cow's kidneys. And here's the magic trick. Suet has a really high melting point, so it melts much later in the steaming process, leaving behind these teeny tiny air pockets that make the pudding incredibly light and smooth. Modern recipes often sub in butter or shortening because they're easier to find, but you'll often end up with a pudding that's a bit denser, maybe a little greasier. But it's not just about the fruit and fat, right? There are a few other key players that really make this dessert sing. Breadcrumbs, which started out as just a cheap way to bulk it up, are now crucial for giving it a lighter texture. That warm hug of spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, gives it that unmistakable Christmas smell and taste. Alcohol does double duty, adding incredible flavor and also acting as a preservative while it ages. Oh, and a little pro tip for modern bakers, a bit of grated apple or even carrot adds a ton of moisture. But here's the thing, and this is really important. A plum pudding is so much more than a list of ingredients. It's a process. It's a whole event. It is a ritual that is just steeped in centuries of tradition. Yeah, this is not something you just decide to whip up on Christmas Eve. The whole process kicks off weeks, sometimes months ahead of time on what's called Stir-Up Sunday. Then comes the marathon steaming. We're talking 4 to 8 hours of slow cooking. After that, It has to age, just patiently sitting for at least a month, letting all those flavors get to know each other and deepen. And it all leads up to that spectacular finale, a final steam to heat it through, and then serving it, dramatically, in a blaze of blue flame from lit brandy. And all of these rituals are just packed with symbolism. For instance, see that number? 13? The traditional recipe called for exactly 13 ingredients. Why? To represent Jesus and his 12 disciples. Every single part of this has a deeper meaning. And the symbolism just keeps going. On Stir Up Sunday, every person in the family gets a turn to stir the batter, and they have to stir it from east to west to honor the journey of the wise men, making a wish while they do it. People used to bake little charms right inside, a silver coin for good fortune, a ring for a future marriage. And that sprig of holly on top, it's not just for looks, it represents the crown of thorns. Just for real, don't eat the berries, they're actually toxic. So that all begs the question, right? In our modern world of instant meals and two-day delivery, why on earth does this incredibly laborious, time-consuming tradition stick around? What makes it so special? I think this little story from one of our sources really gets to the heart of it. A grandma decides to use her husband's super fancy, very expensive cognac in the pudding. At first, he's totally speechless, probably horrified. But in the end, he loves it so much that it becomes their new tradition. And that's exactly the point. The pudding gets woven into our own family stories, our memories, our inside jokes. And that's what it all comes down to, isn't it? The value isn't just in how it tastes, it's in the making of it. It's a true labor of love that starts in November and finishes on Christmas Day. It's a tangible link to the past, a way to connect generations through the simple, shared act of stirring a bowl together. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought. You know, in a way, making a plum pudding is like a quiet little rebellion against the rush of modern life. It forces us to slow down, to plan ahead, to be patient. And it makes you ask, in a world that wants everything instantly, what are the slow, meaningful traditions that we choose to preserve? And what do those traditions say about who we are?